Alright, I'm going to talk about function overloading in this video, and I'm going to use an example that will involve a guitar somehow, or at least the strings on the guitar. I love music and I love coding, so that's a pretty good match for me. So nothing more to say, just let's get started. Alright, we're going to talk about function overloading in TypeScript, and that's a pretty cool feature that I actually didn't know anything about myself since I started with TypeScript, because I mostly used JavaScript in my life and not used a lot of typed languages. So it's a neat thing that you have in TypeScript that I'm going to show you now. And for this one, I'm going to start from scratch, and I installed a library that's called tsnode. That will make it possible to run TypeScript files in the console with a command, and I created this command here, start. So I run ts-node and then the name of the file. And I'm going to have a file that's called strings.ts. I'm actually going to delete all this stuff here, and we're going to start from scratch. So for this one, I'm going to show you an example, and I'm going to have a function that will give us all the strings that we have on a guitar. A guitar has 6 strings, and they are all in different sizes. They have different thickness to them. So I'm going to show you how to create a function with overloading and how we can supply this function with different parameters. First, we're going to have an object that will take in all these 6 strings in an object, and then we can also provide all these 6 strings as individual parameters to this function. So let's start with the interface for this object. So I'm going to create an interface here that I call guitar strings. And then we have the strings in the guitar. First we have, this is going to be from top to bottom on the guitar. So we have the big E, the fattest string on the guitar. And it's going to be a number. Then we have the A, it's also a number. We have the D, it's a number. We have G, number. We have B, number. And the last one is also going to be an E, but I make this a small e as this is the thinnest string on the guitar. So that's the interface of the guitar strings. Then I'm going to create a function. First, I'm going to create it like a regular function, and then I'm going to show you how to use overloading to make this a little bit more nicer for TypeScript and also for the people that will use this function. So I create a function, show guitar strings. This one is going to take in some arguments, and we could do this by specifying different types. So for example, the argument 1, it can be an object. And we have the guitar strings that we created up here, the interface for it. So the argument 1 can be an object, or it can be a number like this. But if we specify a number here, that's just one string. So we have to have 5 other params. So arg2 is going to be a number. arg3 is going to be a number. arg4 is going to be a number. And arg5 is going to be a number. Oh, this is going to be long. arg6 is going to be a number. All right. So that's our function parameters. So inside of this function, we have to check if the first argument is going to be an object, and then we don't use these other ones here. So these ones are actually going to be optional. So I created a question mark on them here. Very, very long. Yeah, but it'll work. All right, we have 2 different cases. We can send in an object with all the strings matching this interface that I created up here, or we can send in the string thicknesses as separate arguments. So I'm going to check if type of arg1, that's the first argument. If that one is the type object, we know that we send in an object, and then we're going to do something here. And in this case, I'm just going to return a new object and spread out the arg1 like this. So this takes care of the object alternative in this function. Otherwise, we're going to return. We have the big E. It's going to be argument 1. We have A, argument 2. We have D, argument 3. We have G, arg4. We have B, arg5, and we have the little e. It's going to be arg6. So this is the function implementation. it essentially checks if this first argument is an object, and then we return this object. We spread it out in a new object and return it. Otherwise, if we don't have an object as the first argument, we're going to return this object here that takes in each parameter here and returns an object. And we can try this out. So I'm going to console log. We're going to call the function show guitar strings. And first I'm going to send in an object. So I'm going to create this object also. I'm going to create it here. Const current strings equal big E 53 A 42 D 32 G 24 B 16 and E is going to be 12. And this is actually the actual strings that I use on my Martin guitar. So I put these strings on yesterday, so that's why I use these numbers here. And this is usually the thickness of the strings that I have on my acoustic guitar. All right, so we can send in this object, current strings, like this. And we can also console log show guitar strings, and we can send in 6 parameters to this one. So 53, 42, 32. And you can see here now that this is actually not right, because we can do this with only 3 arguments and it won't complain because these ones are optional and this is no good. So this is why we're going to use overloading to fix this. Just going to show you this first. So 16 and 12 like this, and then I go to my console and I type in npm start. That's the script that I added, and you can see that it successfully returns 2 objects here, and it looks as it should. But yeah, so it works, and yeah, you're happy with that probably, but I'm not actually happy because this is not good, because as I showed you here, we can do this with only 4 arguments. So if I go back to my terminal, or we can do it with 2 arguments, 3, or yeah, it doesn't really matter. And I run npm start, you can see that these ones are going to be undefined, and that's no good. If we use this function and we don't know the interface, I know it now because I've created it, but some other may not, and use it like this, we'll get an object back that has undefined, and that's no good. So I'm going to turn this back to 6, and now we're going to start creating our overloads. And this is what's so cool, because we create something that's called overloads here. So we create function definitions for all the use cases that we have. So first, I create a function with the exact same name. And this may look a little bit funky. It certainly did for me when I wasn't used to this. And this one is going to take in the argument 1, only 1 argument, and it's going to be of the type guitar strings. And also, I actually haven't specified a return type on these ones. So this is going to return the guitar strings. It's the same structure as this interface that I created up here. We can actually add that one in here also. The return type is going to be guitar strings. So I'm going to remove this sidebar. So now we have the return type, and we have our first function implementation. And this one is only when we send in an object. This is only for this one here. And you can see that it starts to complain here now also, because this one won't work now. This one here is the first alternative when this is an object. So this works. So we have to create another function definition. Function show guitar strings, exactly the same name. arg1 is going to be a number. arg2 is going to be a number. arg3 is going to be a number. arg4 is going to be a number. arg5 is going to be a number. And the last one, arg6, is also going to be a number. And we have the return type of guitar strings like this. So now we have 2 different versions here. And this means that we can only send in an object, or we can send in 6 arguments. It won't accept if we try to send in 3 or 4 or 5 arguments. That won't work. And this will complain also because these ones are optional here, but it's actually not optional in our overload for this version. So we have to cast these ones also as number. So I'm going to copy this one like this. So we always cast them as a number. And now this will work. I'm going to save it, go back to the terminal, clear it, and run npm start. And you can see that it works, so that's great. But how does it work if we try to send in, for example, just 4 arguments? And you can see that it complains now because it tells us that this won't match. No overload expects 4 arguments, but overloads do exist that expects either 1 or 6 arguments. And if you place your cursor here, and I'm on a Mac, so I press Shift, Command, and Space, we can actually see the different overloads. It has to be just to the right of the parameter. And then you can kind of look at all the different options you have here. So the first option is if we send in an object, and in the second one, we need to provide 6 arguments. And this is what's so great about this overloading, because you can specify your functions to be very, very precise. We won't allow anything else than either an object or, in this case, 6 arguments with each value in an argument of these 6. So we can't really call this function with anything else, and that's super great. Also, we don't need to specify it here if we don't want to. We can just type in unknown for these ones. So I'm going to mark them all here like this. But then this one will complain because it doesn't know what this is. Unknown is very, very much like any, but you have to cast them to something before you use them. Otherwise, TypeScript will complain. So arg1 as guitar strings, and it will put those parentheses around it. Okay, yep. So this is essentially function overloading in TypeScript. It's very, very good, where you precisely can specify your functions, and you can't do any mistakes by sending in too few arguments or stuff like that. And if we try to send in just 1 argument as a number here, it will complain also, because then it will recognize that this one is not an object of guitar strings, and it complains. So if you provide a number as the first argument, you have to provide 5 other numbers also. Otherwise, it will grab this overload here and check against that. And that one tells us that we need an object and not a number. So that's pretty cool, actually. All right, that's function overloading in TypeScript. Hope you enjoyed this little video. And if you like my stuff, please subscribe, spread the word, and also press the notification button. And see you in another one.